Hello and welcome to Today in Geography, a podcast produced by the Department of Geography, Environment, and Spatial Sciences at Michigan State University. Each episode, we talk with members of our community about their research and their interests. And then we spend some time spotlighting events and celebrations that have shaped the field of geography. I'm Nathan Moore, an associate professor in the department, and I'll be your host for an engaging exploration of people, places, and stories that shape our world. Today, we're celebrating Geography Awareness Week, but more about that later on in our show. First, I'm joined by Dr. Alan Arbogast, a physical geographer and former chair of our department. Thank you, Alan, for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Nathan.
Let's get to know a little bit about you and your geospatial journey. How did you first find your way to MSU, and how did you get into your current research?
So beginning with how I got to MSU, I did my graduate work at the University of Kansas, got a PhD in geography. That followed a master's degree in geography from that institution. I am a geomorphologist. I study landscape evolution. I worked with a great advisor, always an important thing, when I was doing my graduate work, and he turned me on to dune research in the Central Great Plains. And I was lucky enough to be funded by a NASA Climate Change Fellowship to do that research. Just so happened at about the time that I was finishing up, a position opened up here for a geomorphologist studying landscapes in the Great Lakes region. I did not know much about the region before I came up here, but some background research, learning about these dunes that are all over the place in Michigan. Excuse me, I thought this would be a great opportunity for me, and sold that in my interview and was lucky enough to get the job.
So you've talked before with me about how the dunes in the Great Lakes are kind of understudied, that there are other parts where dunes have been more dug into. Do you know why and what's the direction going now?
Yeah, I think to think of them as understudied at this point is probably an overstatement. We've done an awful lot of research on them over the past, almost 30 years. That's how long I've been here. That's hard to believe. I think it might be true to say that they're underappreciated globally as being coastal dune fields. For those of us who live in the Great Lakes region, of course, we think of coastlines along the Great Lakes. And in many ways, those coastlines behave in manners similar to what's happening along marine coasts around the world, including the formation of dunes. So one of the things that I've been trying to do over the course of time is to describe how our dunes are just as impressive, if not more so, than a lot of coastal dune fields around the world, and we should think about them in that light.
Is there another place in the world that's kind of like the Great Lakes for comparison?
Oh, sure, many places. There are coastal dune fields all over the place. Certainly Europe, the UK have a variety of coastal dune fields. I guess in my experience, those that I've seen, there are some fantastic dune fields on the North Island of New Zealand that look very reminiscent of ours. Similarly, along the coast of Australia, along the southwest coast of Australia, there are nice dune fields there that are reminiscent of ours. What makes ours distinctive is that they occur on a fresh water body that isn't marine in that sense. And it's right here in the middle of the Midwest, which people don't normally associate with that kind of those kind of processes, but yet here they are.
If you could take us like on a audio field trip to one of your favorite dune fields in the Great Lakes, where would you go and what would you describe to us?
I think what I would do is I would probably take you to the place where it all started for me, which is Van Buren State Park. Now, I've been here a long time, and I've talked to lots of folks about dune fields, and the question that I'm routinely asked is, have I been to or have I done research at Sleeping Bear? And I have. It's a magnificent place to look at dunes, and a fantastic landscape with these big perched dunes sitting over these high bluffs looking out over the lake and the islands. But the dune fields along the southeastern coast of Lake Michigan, our southwestern coast, are in many ways more impressive because they line the coastline for many, many, many miles. Huge deposits of sand, very thick, up to 150 feet high, very impressive dune forms. I started working at Van Buren at a time that was right after a high lake level phase back in the late 90s. And the structures, if you will, of the dunes were beautifully exposed at that time because there had been a lot of bluff erosion. All the plant cover had been removed, or at least a lot of it. And so you could see the stratigraphy, the layering of the sediments and soils within the dunes very clearly. That was really fortunate for me because in the 15 years after that, when the lake was low, the dunes grassed over quite a lot. And I would not have been able to see the interior or the guts of these dunes, if you will, the way I did in the early 90s. So it's a particularly dynamic place to look at how the exposures of dunes can change regularly because of their sensitivity, and I think that's the place I'd take you. Plus, the access is easy. You can park there, walk right down to the beach, and there you go.
Now, you talk about yourself as a geomorphologist, and I've heard you talk about the late Mississippian and other very technical terms, but I feel like in the more recent years, you've started leaning into the human geography of it and talked about how the dunes and the shores of Michigan are really important to the people in Michigan. How important are they?
It's difficult to measure. It's sort of an intangible thing. I will say this, that we have approximately 9 million people in the state of Michigan, population-wise. According to the state of Michigan, Eagle, there are about 3 million people that visit the dunes in some capacity every year.
Every year?
Yeah. So you're looking at a third of the population. Now, of course, these are multiple visits, oftentimes by the same people, so it's not exactly the same. Little apples to oranges there in that population comparison. But nevertheless, they're a source of a lot of pride and enjoyment of the people of Michigan. Clearly, there's a lot of money spent over there. I worked on a project with Robbie Richardson, who's now the geographer with the U.S. government, however that's going at the moment. And he looked at perceptions of dunes and money spent there, and it's significant. And that's just people that are visiting parks, beach going, things like that, to hang out in the dunes. In addition, there are thousands of people, probably tens of thousands of people, that live among the dunes. And they're having subtle impacts on that landscape. And so when you think about the combined effects of people living within the dunes and the impacts of people visiting and playing in the dunes, and of course sand mining that is ongoing still, it's a very dynamic landscape that has a lot of human interaction.
If I could go back in time a little bit, you haven't always worked in the Great Lakes, right? Where did you work before you were working in the Great Lakes?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I did my graduate work at Kansas. My bachelor's was in the 1980. Holy cow! And that was in anthropology with a minor in archaeology. And I started in the field as an archaeologist. Basically, when you're a 22-year-old kid, you're a glorified ditch digger, is what you are. But I kind of got my foot in the door that way, and when we were working on the sites, there was a geomorphologist from KU who came to do the site interpretation of what the landscape evolution of that locality was, and how prehistoric peoples, indigenous people back 1,000, 2,000 years ago, interacted with the landscape. So in the course of meeting him and working some with him, I got turned on to geomorphology. I wound up working with him for my graduate degree, and I've been here ever since.
So you've worked all over the center of North America.
Yeah, I'm a Midwestern geomorphologist. That's what I am.
But you really wear a lot of geography hats, and I hear you talking about geography on you'll see geography in a lot of everyday circumstances. What are some of the ways that geography has shaped the way that you look at your world?
Yeah, it's I'm kind of a classic example. I did not take a geography class when I was in college. It did not occur to me. I hadn't had a geography class when I was in high school, like so many people in the United States experience now. I was unaware of it as a professional discipline, let alone an academic one.
It's just making maps, right?
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, I didn't really even think about it. But then through the course of my experience with this guy who helped with our archaeological sites, I started to I was enlightened at that point. And then, of course, was more so when I started my graduate program. But the way geography informs my life is, I mean, I see everything through that prism.
You got to say something about sports geography.
Yeah, right. Okay, I was gonna, sure. So a class that I developed just for fun is called sports geography. And it's something that I started thinking about when I was lucky enough to teach in Australia for several summers in the aughts. 5 or 6 years I was down there for 5 weeks each summer. You did that too.
I did that.
You did that too. And I got really fired up about Australian sport, Aussie rules football, National Rugby League. I even got to the point where I understood and appreciate cricket, which I didn't know was possible. And I got to thinking about, well, you know what? There's a lot of geographical aspects about sports. And I thought maybe I can put together a course that focuses on that just for fun and to try to attract some majors that way. And I've been teaching it, I guess 12 years now, teaching it this semester, and it's a blast.
So you see geography in every field and every nook and cranny.
Yeah, and as geographers, of course, I'm not, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but that's just kind of the way we see everything is in the context of its spatial orientation, distribution, whether it be dunes in Michigan, the geography of sports, health stuff, economics, all sorts of things.
Is there one idea or a fact that you found is like very resonant with you that you would love to share with the world? Something that everyone should know?
Everyone should know, certainly in the United States, everyone should know that the concepts, theories, thinkings about geography apply to their lives in a myriad of ways all the time. I teach like you, I think, in the sense that we try to confront that head on. And I'm teaching a class right now, Big Ideas in Social Science. Well, my big idea is how geography applies to all sorts of things. And indeed, when I started the class, I polled my students how many of them had had a geography class in high school, and maybe it was 15%. A full-on geography of something. Many of them had elements of geography, of course, in a social science course or a history course or something like that, which, of course, is the way it's usually embedded in that curriculum. But they were unaware of the applications of geography to everything.
Well, Duke Winters, a former professor here, used to say, geography is that which, when found useful, is called something else. And I think that sort of illustrates that point.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we get lost a little bit in the shuffle because of that, which can be frustrating. And one of the reasons why Geography Awareness Week is an important thing. There's not an economics awareness week or a business awareness week or a psychology awareness week because everybody knows what that is, what those disciplines are. We have to sell ourselves because of the general lack of understanding that most people have about it.
Now, there might be a few people out there listening who are young and maybe thinking about getting into geography. So is there any advice you might give to a young person or maybe a mid-career person who's looking for a change and wants to get into geography?
Well, I'll think about the conversation that I had with a student yesterday. He's a bright kid in my class. He's asked a lot of questions. This is the Big Ideas geography class. He's asked a lot of good questions over the course of the term so far. And after class yesterday, he wanted to talk about maybe switching his major to geography, but he did not. He was concerned about the lack of jobs in this field. When I was chair of the department, I had some conversations with parents who were concerned that their kids were about to major in geography and what kind of job could they acquire knowing the capitals of the states. And just in this short conversation here, I think we've demonstrated that it's a lot more than that. And so he and I had a long conversation about, well, you could get a job in business if you like technology. You can work in technology, drones, GIS. I mean, health, all sorts of things. And you just have to keep your eyes open to it and give yourself permission to think that this is a genuine possibility. And I think a lot of people are just naturally resistant to it because of the biases that exist in the country as it is with respect to the discipline as a whole. And, we need to do what we can to overcome that.
Thinking to your research and the insights you've gained, is there one insight that you would hope that everyone could remember and carry on about them, about the dunes or about anything you've done in your research?
Yeah, about the dunes, it's that they're inherently very sensitive landscapes. They're being pulled on a lot of different directions by the state of Michigan and sand mining and businesses and people and parks and I think my thinking about the dunes and what I think is important has changed over time. The first 20 years or so that I was working on them, I was just interested in reconstructing their evolutionary history. When were periods of time that they grew? When were there periods of time that they stabilized? Are there any geographical, spatial differences up and down the coast with respect to those concepts? And that's what I focused on. Now I'm thinking more about, well, how do people of Michigan want to think about their dunes 100 years from now? There's lots of evidence that they're covered more by plant cover now than they were even 30 years ago. Plants stabilize dunes, which means that there are fewer patches of bare sand blowing around. All of the pressure right now, in a very slow kind of drip way, is for dunes to become increasingly stable. Somebody builds a house in a dune field, that stabilizes that portion of the dune field. There are people plant plants because they're trying to keep sand from blowing around and maybe burying a deck, that stabilizes the dune field. Is that what we want for our dunes? In Europe, particularly in the UK, in the last 10 years or so, they've realized that their dune fields are becoming increasingly stable. In other words, not moving, not active, which is what dunes naturally do. And so they, to address the issue, have started pulling plants here and there, actually, devegetating places on purpose to let sand move around like it would naturally. And it's be interesting to think whether, the people of Michigan would want to take approach similar to that at some point in the future.
We tend to turn our deserts into golf courses instead of changing the way we behave.
Sure. And you know as well or better than I that there's a long list of places that people live in the United States and all around the world for that matter, that are sensitive landscapes, whether they be in box canyons in Southern California where the fire potential is high, to floodplains along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers and places like that, which are prone to flooding, and in dune fields and bluffs along Lake Michigan that are prone to instability. And the conflict is always, how much of that do we allow? Who pays the price when bad things happen and all of that? And dunes are no different.
Thanks, Al, for coming in today and talking about your geospatial journey. I know you're going to stick around and talk to us about Geospatial Awareness Week, but first, let's take a moment for a word from our sponsor. At Michigan State University's Department of Geography, Environment, and Spatial Sciences, geography is more than just maps. It's a way of seeing the world, understanding patterns, connections, and change across physical, human, and technological landscapes. Whether you're curious about using GIS, remote sensing, and drones to analyze the Earth's surface, or exploring how human societies interact with climate, land, and resources, or uncovering the spatial aspects of public health, urban planning, economic development, and environmental changes, a degree in geography from MSU will open the door to a wide range of interesting and rewarding careers. You can choose from a Bachelor of Science concentrations in Earth observation and geospatial analytics, physical environment and climate, or human environment and economic geography. Or you can tailor your own path through human, physical, and regional geography courses with a Bachelor of Arts degree. At MSU Geography, you won't just study the world, you'll help shape it. Ready to map your future? Visit geo.msu.edu and talk with an academic advisor today. So this week, we're celebrating Geography Awareness Week. What is that?
What is Geography Awareness Week? That is our effort. It's a national effort. But here at MSU, we use the week to raise awareness about geography. I mean, it sounds redundant, but to raise awareness about geography, to celebrate the career possibilities associated with our discipline, and to have fun with it in a way that makes people think about us as a major destination.
A lot of people don't, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't think about geography as something you do other than maps. What are some recent speakers that we've had come to MSU for Geography Awareness Week that show the breadth of geography in its?
Yeah, we, when I was department chair, we embarked on I guess what I would say at the time was an aggressive effort to really get after Geography Awareness Week and to raise our profile around campus. We invited a speaker in every year to speak to the group as a whole, but one that was advertised campus-wide to bring people to the Passad Center, for example, where some of our presentations were. Wells Hall, the big lecture halls there, we had a couple of them there, to just have people come in and listen to someone talk about how geography was related to what they were doing and to sell the discipline some for us. My favorites, I think I was involved in 9. My favorites was our first when we had the director of Chasing Ice come and speak to us and present his film. Jeff Orlowski was his name. And I mean, it was so good. Really felt like we were doing something cool that night. And it was about basically looking at glaciers and how they've changed over time and how that's being impacted by climate change. Excellent talk. We had an astronaut. Oh man, what was her name?
Roberta Bondar.
Roberta Bondar. Yeah, I spaced that. Canadian astronaut who flew on the space shuttle 25 years ago or something like that. And she was awesome. She nailed it. She talked a lot about how geography informed her work while she was on the shuttle. And then she went through all of our course offerings and talked about how exciting they were and that anybody who was interested in these kinds of things should absolutely be taking our classes. That might have been the best from that perspective. And then another one that we had that I really enjoyed was when Bill Weir from CNN came.
Yeah.
And he talked about how geography, was involved in his work as kind of a travel correspondent who's, kind of going to hot spots around the world. And that was really good primarily because he was such a high profile person, but he was so personable at the same time. I mean, he really interacted with students well, and it was really good.
One of the things that really stood out to me with Geography Awareness Week is how easy it is to find connections, that we do it all the time, but we don't think of it as geography. And I'm always surprised when people don't make the connection now that I see it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Al, for joining us today. If folks are interested in learning more about your research, is there some place you could direct us?
Yeah, I guess the thing to do would be to keep living for a couple of years at least. And I'm going to have a book come out probably in the next year, I think. I'm working with MSU Press on a kind of a review book about Michigan's sand dunes and, how we know what we know about them, what are the patterns that we see, kind of a casual field trip based on science that walks folks all around Michigan and celebrates our sand dunes. So look for that.
Okay, we will. We'll put information about that book as we get it in the show notes if you are interested. So that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for listening to Today in Geography from MSU's Department of Geography, Environment, and Spatial Sciences. Be sure to subscribe and share, and join us next time as we continue exploring the people, places, and stories that shape the world around us.